Welcome to Work It Out, Sweat Therapy with Emily, yours truly. And this is the series where we work it out and we talk it out. And since this month is Mental Health Awareness Month, we are talking about everything to do with right here. And today's episode is all about external validation and our need for it. In today's workout, all you need are dumbbells, a bench, and yourself. Let's get to it. I actually want to call today's episode Validation Epidemic because that's personally how I view what is going on. One thing I do want to say is that what we experience mentally and what we have to cope with and what we have to build the mental tool set for is constantly changing, right? Not only in your own personal journey and growth, but also what is happening in society. And I think that today's topic about validation is a product of exactly that, where society's at right now versus when our parents were growing up and what social media has really come with in terms of all the amazing stuff, right? I don't want to just constantly be on here bashing social media as I'm on it talking to you. But as we know, it kind of has taken on a life of its own in terms of some of this other stuff to do with mental health that we didn't previously have to deal with, or maybe we weren't as bombarded with such a thing. And I think validation is exactly that, an external validation, because obviously there's internal validation too, but what we're talking about today is all about the need of being something in someone else's eyes. And one thing I also want to say about it is I personally believe this. Obviously, you know, I'm not a psychologist. This is just me talking out from my own journey and my own introspective work, because I am definitely never on a high horse talking down to you. I am talking my journal out to you. This is what I personally have been or have worked on and continue to work on. I personally believe that external validation and people pleasing are cousins. If you struggle with people pleasing, as I have in the past, I don't think you're exempt from external validation or the need for it, because in the light of people pleasing, you want to make people happy and you're constantly bending over backwards for them. It's because you also, most of the time, want this external validation from them. There's an outcome from it, an expectation that you want. And those two things I don't think are separate. In today's topic, talking all about it, I think you're gonna see that as well. Let's get to the workout, because now I'm warm. Some of y'all are not gonna wanna hear this right now, but it is honestly the best example of this epidemic. And if you did do it, I'm not here judging you for it. Everyone has their reasons. It's, again, just a really good example. As you know, you can now buy your way into a verification on Instagram. So you can purchase a blue check. Again, I think that the blue check itself probably started, I don't know exactly, so don't quote me, but started as a way to tell what accounts were real, especially for celebrities, right? There were mimickers, catfishers, all that. So more for like a security reason. But over the years, as I'm sure you witnessed, it became something that made you something. If you had that blue check, you was somebody, even if you weren't anybody and somehow got it. So now, as I'm sure you've also seen, there's a flood of blue checks. Like, they be everywhere, popping up everywhere. And I think I saw, actually, again, don't quote me on the numbers, it was crazy. It was something like the first 24 hours of it, millions were made, millions. And I think it's like $15 a month. So do the math, that's wild. That just shows that we are living in a time where something as small as a blue check gives worth because of external validation. It's not actually worth anything. You can't cash it in at the bank, right? You can't loan it, trade it, study it, certify it, go to university for 8 years for it. It is literally something, doesn't technically have a worth, but it has this make-believe validation that has actually become something in society. So people are now willing to spend $15 a month, because it doesn't seem much, right? It's a Netflix comparable thing, just to be viewed differently by people they haven't met, probably will never meet, to be in this category that is viewed as somebody. Like, really sit with that statement right there. Like, that's wild. Like, we are currently living in a time where you don't have to do anything but buy, wow, I'm really out of breath. I really did it. But buy a digital blue check. You can't even do anything with it. You can't even get a bumper sticker with it on. Like, it is a digital thing that does not tangibly exist. If you are off your phone and in the outside world, ain't nobody gonna know you have that blue check. If you're at the grocery store and you say hi to the person in line, they're not like, ooh, that's a nice blue check you have floating by your head right there. It doesn't even exist. But yet people are so willing to do it because it then gives that validation that they're looking for. Again, I know there's reasons, like some people are doing it so that they're at the top of inboxes, their business inquiries get seen, for brands maybe. There are other reasons, but even when you boil down those reasons, if it is for a greater good of business or marketing or some other agenda, we end up at the same place. All the reasons evaporate and we're left at the same place, which is that it is giving validity. It is giving a stamp that someone is slightly more important because they have it. That is the epitome of external validation. So obviously external validation existed much before this Instagram phenomenon, but I think when you're doing the introspective work, so you're looking at yourself, the key is to see first where it is showing up, where it's presenting itself, and then we look at the why, right? So if where it's presenting is Instagram, then look at why you feel the need to have that external validation. So one of the most common, and I know again speaking from personal growth and what I've been learning about myself, is it often comes from a root of not actually believing in yourself 100%. So with that little bit, let's say you believe in yourself 80%, but you got that 20, that's real sketchy, you're gonna lean into getting that validation elsewhere. Not to say, I think it's very human to waver, right? You're not always 100% of the time going to have 100% belief in everything you're doing and yourself. But I do think that when you do the deep work, that inner work on yourself, and again, highlight the areas where you previously were seeking external validation and instead fill that void, literally pour in. And the more you do that, I think even in the times where you might waver in the belief or have like even the tiniest doubt sneak in, you're not gonna lean on validation. You might lean on a friend or a family member or a partner to be like, no, you got this, that's a great idea. But you're not leaning on strangers you've never met or comparing to what this girl or this guy or this person did as a way to validate what you're doing. It's like, it honestly, I talked about comparison in an episode before, go watch that episode, because I just think that, again, in this epidemic of validation and why social media makes it so bad, we're bombarded with all of these subconscious comparisons, right? So even if you're being super conscious on, no, I don't need any validation, you open your phone the next day and you see what someone's doing and you start questioning what you're doing. So even when you do strengthen the tool set of not needing external validation, it's almost like you get tested because it's just constantly popping up. I don't think that this is something that you're ever going to be, again, 100% perfect at doing, and that's not the goal. We're not out here trying to be perfect, and I don't think that that is what doing the mental or the inner work should ever be viewed at, right? We, to a certain degree, cannot control the weather outside. So I view you doing that inner work, getting all these mental tools, as building this house, right? Your house is you. That is what you're building, you own, you believe in, you live in, you feel safe in. But we can't control if there's a big thunderstorm that happens and a few of the shingles go loose, you're gonna have to go up to the roof and fix it. And that is exactly, I personally think, balance in existing in a time where we're bombarded, right? Every day you open that phone, it's gonna be something. But when you have the mental tool set and you also view it with grace and not putting pressure on yourself, then your mental tools are just, even if there is a little leak, it's gonna give you the ability to fix it. That's how I personally now view, because I really starting to get in a mindset where I just wanted to, oops, I already did that arm. We don't wanna double up. I was in a mindset of where I honestly just wanted to go off social media completely. It's like, I was so battling because I have all these ideas and all this stuff I want to share. I didn't want to participate. It wasn't even that I felt the need anymore for external validation, because I definitely did at a point, and we'll get into that. But it was almost like I didn't want to go to the party. Like, I don't want to be involved. And you know, we've all been in that where you commit to plans, you say you're going to the party, and then you get in and you're like, I don't want to be here, I just want to go home. That's how I was starting to feel. And that was when I realized there was still some inner work that I really had to do. It actually got to the point where I wouldn't didn't even want to post something because I got fewer views. Let's say 100 views on something, and I thought it was great before I posted it, like really believed in it, right? Loved it, because I really do make content out of passion, and I would post it and then really it didn't hit. I would then all of a sudden, my perception on something that I believed in and loved prior to posting tanked, because I saw the result of the views and let the views then determine how successful it was or how good it was. That's where I realized I had inner work to do yet, because I really had to dissect why I would create something, believe in it, something with purpose and passion, and then the second I attach again this imaginary validity to it, I then didn't believe in it anymore. It really took looking at that for myself. Listen, I am not innocent of it. I still am working on it, but there's points where I'll go and post something, and right as I'm about to hit post, I'd be like, Emily, why are you doing it? And it's like a post that didn't have meaning, but I knew would get a ton of likes. And let's be like super honest here. I go on a whole other episode about this. It would be like a bikini picture I know will hit, and it will make my numbers go up, and then my analytics go up. But then it had absolutely no correlation to the message I'm sending, to the things I'm developing, the ways I can help people, what I'm trying to share to the world. But that dopamine hit of external validation would just like make me feel good in the moment and make me feel like what I was doing was worth it because the numbers matched. And that ain't right. That's literally like sipping on the very Kool-Aid that I got away from, and then just taking a little like, oh, no, that's not it. And again, I'm not pointing fingers at anyone and how they use social media. That is 100% on them. This is just my own personal awareness and observation and growth that I've been on with really looking at the role it plays in my life and the why. Because I think everything in life, and the greatest thing with mental health, is really understanding your whys. Why you do certain things, why you think certain ways, and breaking those down into the elements, right? The small components. And then that will show you what should stay and what should go, what needs to be healed, what needs to grow. For me, it really took finding that why I felt successful based on numbers, even though I loved what I did, or vice versa, throwing up something because I knew whatever, it was gonna get a result, but it didn't make me feel good because it wasn't what my passion and what my path is. That was a major realization. It's hard because social media is part of, I haven't met a person recently that it hasn't been part of their daily life. I know they exist and they probably aren't watching this because they're not on it, but blessings to them, and they found a life that has navigated around it. But I think it is all in finding a life that it can be in your life without controlling your life in this way. And the external validation is just, it will get you nowhere. So obviously there may be other sources of external validation that aren't social media, and I do want to touch on those. It can show up in other aspects of your life. My personal example actually was before I was really even on social media, and I did fitness shows for a while, bikini shows. My reason for getting into them originally was that I'd always been an athlete. I had gotten injured at the end of university, and I really was looking for a competitive outlet in my life. I really was always a competitor. There's something about that is always gonna be in you if you were an athlete, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like that craving for competition. So I got into fitness shows. When I got into it, it was again for that reason, also to prove to myself, so more internal validation, that this was something outside my comfort zone that I could do. And I think that's a healthy thing, and there's many people that do fitness shows for that exact reason or other really positive reasons. So by all means, I'm not painting a negative light on the entire industry or sport, but what it quickly became for me as I had done a couple of shows was it grew, again, this need for external validation that actually didn't even exist before necessarily. Again, I think we all have different ways that we experience it throughout life. I remember it was my last show, and I'm standing on stage, and if you've ever been to these shows or participated, it's like the final, right? So there was 3 of us to determine first, second, third. We're standing on stage, doing our little poses in front of this panel of judges, right? This table of judges. And what's funny is if you really break down the essence of that on its own, it's external validation. You're literally being judged, right? So if you've been in anything like pageants or anything where there's judges, you're literally getting externally validated, right, based upon criteria that have been set. I obviously knew that going in, but there was this very distinct moment in that final where there's a girl on my left and right, and so I'm standing there posing, but I look to my left and right, and I was like, holy shit, I look exactly like this girl here and this girl here. Like, to a scary T, because in these competitions, typically, there's a standardization to the spray tan, which is very orange, to your hair, makeup in this particular competition. All that was very standardized, right down to the clear heels. But I looked to my left and right, and I was just like, oh my God, you cannot tell us apart. And I'm someone who has really taken my own personal uniqueness and identity with great importance. Like, I no matter what I've done, I've never lost that, except for in that moment. It honestly scared me, because I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And what am I trying to get out of it? At the end of the competition, you can actually talk with the judges and get, constructive criticism for a future competition. Like, what can I do differently? The athlete in me is like, okay, how could I train differently? What can I bring forth? What hard work can I do for the next one? And that judge looked at me and said, like, no, you're great. Just take a year off. Go get your breasts enlarged, right? So go get surgery, because typically with the degree of body fat loss that happens for those shows, that can go down, and come back and you'll win for sure. That was all I needed. That was the moment for me where I looked to the side, and what that judge told me was enough for me to see that the only reason at that point for me to continue forward would be to be externally validated, because that's outside my control. Going to get that surgery is something outside of my control. I can't do that in the gym. I can't work hard for that. That would be doing something and changing a piece of myself just to be validated by other people. And that was my major wake-up call, where I kind of vowed to myself moving forward that any decision I made would not be to impress someone. It would only be for something that made me happy inside. And I urge you to just take a moment and really see in your life where, again, there's those sources of external validation that you feel like you need, the why, and then really sit with the things that you can personally do to make yourself happy, to fill those voids, nobody else. And if you are a recovering people pleaser, like myself, then that is going to be a challenge. Like, that's actually going to be really difficult for you, because you also have to let go of those narratives. There's going to be people that you're not going to make them happy. They're not going to see you the way that you see yourself. They're not going to give you a response that maybe you want. You can't place these expectations on the outside world, because if you do, you're constantly going to be needing for that validation and doing things to get it and going to extremes to get that outcome. And that's just not necessary. If there's people who can't see you for your authentic you, they're not your people. And I think that's the other issue with the internet is there's millions of people. You never know who's going to see you. You never know when you're posting whose page it's going to land up on, right? But there's going to be people that no matter how amazing what you're putting out in the world is, they're going to be like, that's trash, whack, wow, ugly, whatever they're saying. And that is not your job to please them. There's no need to people please at all, period. But especially strangers online, sitting behind technology. There's no need for that. So I just really urge you, hopefully my personal stories, maybe you could relate to or help you see an area in your life where there is that external validation going on, and then just start filling those voids with you, your work, your happiness, finding your most authentic self. And once all those holes are filled, there's no room for external validation. No room at all, so there's definitely no need. Think of it like filling potholes. There's gonna might be a little bumps in there, but there's not gonna be the hole. You don't need to fill it with the opinion of someone else or spend your life striving for that. So I really, really hope that this hit home and that social media becomes a positive thing in your life with catching these areas where mental health can suffer from it. Take this month, May is the month of working on here, and I encourage you to, if this inspires you to journal about it, whatever your source of getting in here is, maybe even talking to a therapist, talking to friends, but sit with yourself too, and you're gonna learn a lot. Thank you for listening.